We're live.
Great.
Hey, Christina, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here. So thank you so much for taking time. Let's just start by getting an intro of yourself, your background, right? What are you up to?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Cristina Daroca. I am the Senior Director of Global Demand and Americas Marketing at Riverbed Technology. Riverbed is a company that serves IT professionals. We have a few different types of products, but essentially, helping big organizations with their employee and their customer digital experiences, everything from, the network to their devices, to the applications they're using, really making sure that everything is working and working efficiently. And
Awesome.
yeah, I've been in marketing for over 12, 13 years now, doing a few different roles, but always in the ABM, demand gen, field marketing area of the house. So
Sure.
yeah, very excited to chat with you today.
Absolutely. Uh, are you doing a lot of ABM activities for Riverbed currently?
Yes, we're doing a couple of different flavors of it. We have a few
Mhm.
accounts where we're doing more of a one-to-one approach, very white glove type of thing. And then we
Mm.
do one to few, and then more of like the demand generation, one to many, targeted demand.
Right. And how long have you been doing ABM specifically, and how has your journey been so far? And what
Yeah.
exactly do you like being an ABM marketer?
Yeah, I do love it. I always say that, I love working with sales, and sales has been doing ABM forever, right? Like that is how they
Mm.
sell. They have their list of accounts and they do very, one-to-one approaches.
Right.
So I love it. I think it's the way to go, especially if you're selling, bigger contracts to enterprise companies, big organizations.
Hmm.
And yeah, I started back in 2015-ish, and when ABM was starting to sort of like become a thing.
Right.
I started it in a different company, but very rudimentary type of like only doing email and trying to do email sequences per account and things like that. So very, it was sort of like pre vendors and pre technology, right, for ABM.
Right.
And then I've been at a few different companies doing it in different ways. But essentially, the basics is the same, right? Like understanding
Right.
your accounts, having a very targeted list of accounts that you want to go after, aligning with sales on how we go after those accounts and how we try to sell to them,
Hmm.
and then picking, a few different tactics to try and engage those accounts.
Okay. Are there any favorite ABM programs, campaigns that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, so we actually just ran one that started at the end of last year, and we're still sort of going through it. And I think it has been a really successful, really great way for us to engage our top accounts. We hosted a roundtable, a virtual roundtable with about 6 or 7 accounts,
Hmm.
pretty executive level people. We brought them together. We had our CIO sit in and speak with them because he is our buyer persona, right? So someone
Sure.
who really understands the market very well, and he can relate to our customers very well. So
Hmm.
they sat down, they had a conversation. It was all about cloud technology and how to manage the cloud for big organizations. And then what we did was we took the things that those folks had shared during the roundtable, and we wrote sort of like an ebook on it with their thoughts, without really quoting them, but just sort of like going through the things that they had shared, the experiences they had.
Hmm.
And then we use that as a way to follow up from that roundtable and engage with them, continuing the conversation.
Hmm.
It was a really great way for us to make them feel very special, because we said, hey, thanks for participating on the roundtable, and here's a piece of content that you can share in your organization that you actually helped build, because you'll see
Hmm.
that your thoughts are on the document. And it really, it made them feel very special, and it helped us, continue that conversation and have another piece of content that now we have to go to those accounts and others, to really talk about that topic. So again, a very, like very targeted, very small number of accounts, but it's really about that experience and making the customer really feel heard.
Hmm.
and continue that conversation with them so that you can eventually get to opportunities and deals, etc.
Cool. Uh, what was the like? Were there any previous touch points before you got them? So did you warm up? Did you have previous conversations with
So
them, or like any engagements
yeah,
before? Like what? I'm really curious to know what point of time do you activate this kind of a very closed door kind of an
right.
events?
Yeah, so they weren't cold accounts. They were accounts we had been working with previously, but we hadn't been able to engage with that level of executives, right? So we were working with more of the users, the technical folks, but we needed to get to the executive level. So we engaged a third-party vendor, which is something that some companies really try to do ABM all by yourself, and that's not
Mm.
how it has to be. You can always engage someone to help you.
Right.
So we engaged a third-party vendor who has that network of executives and who could help us, bring those executives to a roundtable, to a session,
Hmm.
and help them have that conversation amongst themselves. And so it was really great because we could go after accounts that we knew were having similar challenges. They were all in the
Mm.
same industry, so we could kind of group them in that way instead of just having disparate folks who might not have the same challenges or the same conversation. So
Right.
I wouldn't say they were cold accounts, but the folks who came to the roundtable were sort of new to us because we
Mm.
hadn't specifically engaged with them before.
Right. What do you think are the motivations for these executives, right, and their busy schedules, right? So leaving out the regular work
Yeah,
schedule and then getting into events like this. Like,
yeah,
what have you gathered around? Like, why do they come and then like share or
yeah.
discuss or identify new strategies or anything like that?
Yeah, I think what executives are really looking for is really having an open conversation with their peers, right? Folks who
Hmm.
are going through the same challenges they're going through, where you're not selling to them. We did not talk about our product at all in that entire conversation. It was just
Right.
really facilitating the conversation and saying, hey, here are five of your peers that are at similar companies as you are. These were all pretty big companies, so they all knew each other and they knew, all of the other companies. So
Hmm.
that helps because it's like I love going to roundtables about marketing because I learn from others and I understand what others are doing.
Yeah.
So it's really giving them that opportunity to come together with their peers, come together with others that are doing the same things as them.
Hmm.
Not so much, hey, come to this conversation and we're going to sell you our product because that
Right.
definitely would not
That
engage
doesn't work.
them.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Hmm.
And I think you are one of the most experienced ABMers, right? Around you talked about how you started at around 2015 when that wasn't a thing. But like when you look at it now, if you are a B2B marketer and then if you're not
Hmm.
talking about ABM or implementing an ABM, you're sort of look downwards, right? And
Hmm.
look down. Um, and hence there's a lot of interest in ABM, but there's a
Hmm.
lot of unknowns. People don't know exactly where to start, right? You talked about how you went in the first company you started with email engagements, for example, right? Is that the way to go? So like having all the experience that you have today, how would you advise somebody who's thinking of ABM today to start with, right? And I think I
Yeah.
have another follow-up question. Let me just come back to it once
Yeah.
you respond to this.
Yeah, so it really depends on what you're trying to achieve and where your company is at, and there's a lot of things that I would look at before I just launch into, hey, this is what we're doing. But in general, the way I would do it is I would try to group a number of accounts around 30, 40, 50ish, either based on some similarity. Either they're in the same industry, or they are going through the same challenge, or they are in a market that is highly regulated, if you're helping with regulation, or something that they all share.
Hmm.
And start there, start with a bigger bucket, if you will, and start targeting them. I wouldn't necessarily start with email because email is very difficult. If they don't know you, they're just going to ignore your email. So I might
Right.
start with something a little bit more, on the digital side. Maybe you put together some content and put that in front of them via ads. Maybe an experience, like I said, like a round table or a conversation like that, or a series of events where you can target them. And then I would track that very closely and see where the accounts start to engage. And then once you start to see some engagement and some, content consumption, maybe some are coming to your website, etc., then that's where you start to hone in into more of the one-to-one piece. And
Hmm.
along with your sales team, you start to see like, hey, this account is engaging here, here, and here. What are you finding from a sales perspective? And then we come together and really go after it in more of a one-to-one motion. I think it's
Hmm.
very difficult to start one-to-one right off the gates without
Right.
having a little bit of having seen engagement from an account, or having seen some warm up there.
Right. Is that how your programs are structured? So you talked about different flavors of ABM that you're executing for Riverbed, right? So like, how does it all
Yeah.
connect, and how do you bring together
So
all these
yeah,
programs?
so for example, in the Americas, we are doing that now. We have a number of accounts that we're going after. They are all in the same industry, and then from there, we're tracking the engagement very closely. And once we start seeing
Like in
engagement,
in about a range, right? So what would be in for a one to many type of ABM? What would be your
yep,
target account list size? What
yeah,
would be the size
in
of your?
one too many is in the hundreds. It's probably like
It's in the
300,
hundreds.
400. Yeah. Then we
Okay.
have one too
Mm.
few, which is around like 40, 50. And then from there, we
Mm-hmm.
go into one to one, which is only a
Okay.
couple of accounts a quarter, because you need to do, a lot of engagements and very customization there.
Got it. Okay. So how do you connect these three programs?
Right. So one to many is more on our demand generation side of the house. So we're doing more general demand generation tactics. Obviously, we have our ICP definition. We know exactly what companies and what types of companies we want to go after. But we
Sure.
have general demand generation programs, meaning webinars. We have digital ads. We have content that we pump out. We have events that we go to. But then from there, we have a few folks that are focused on driving the one to few. So they have a list of, we get together with sales and we put together a list of, like I said, 40, 50 accounts. We try to stay within one or two industries so that we can talk more about the industry and the challenges in that industry. But that really
Right.
depends on what you're selling and your product. It might not make sense by industry. It might make sense by something by region, or whatever it is. And so that's where we start to do a very tight alignment with sales. We pick a few sellers that have those accounts. We work with them very closely. We meet with them every week. We review the account plan. We also have a BDR on the team who is
Mm-hmm.
prospecting and reaching out to the account and trying to engage folks in that way. And then the marketer on that team, on that little team, is also connecting the demand generation pieces, right? So if we run a webinar and one person from those accounts comes to the webinar, it is the marketer's responsibility to identify that and say, hey guys, we had this webinar on the demand gen side of the house and this person was engaged. So then that starts to be included in the ABM plan.
Got it.
And then again, from there, when we see high engagement with some of the accounts, we then start to look at what can we do on a more one-to-one
Mm-hmm.
basis with this specific account, and start, surrounding that account with more customized content.
Right. And what kind of activities do you do in a one-to-one kind of an outreach? Is it
Mhm.
like primarily marketing, or it's primarily sales, or it's an equal effort, or how?
It's both. It's really both. From marketing, it's really, but usually around experiences. We invite them to be speakers at specific shows that we're going to, or events that we're putting together. We
Hmm.
have them speak at our webinars. We can custom. We get all the way to customizing content for them. We try not
Right.
to reinvent the wheel, so it's not brand new content for an account, but we would
Right.
grab a piece of content that we have and customize it a little bit for that account more specifically. So
Right.
it's a little bit of everything. And then, like I said, the seller and the BDR, they are reaching out to the account and trying to get more folks involved.
Hmm. Hmm. Excellent. And in your one-to-many demand gen kind of a ABM outreach, right? So do you have any involvement from sales at all, or it is just like it stops at like helping them identify the accounts? Like, is it like stops at account selection, or do you have any specific conversations around those accounts which are still lying at the very top of funnel?
Yeah, no, on the one to many, it's more on the marketing team. We have an agreement with sales in terms of the ICP, who are our best accounts, number of employees, size of the account, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then with that, we obviously we have our named accounts and specific accounts that we want to go after, but we are really trying to broaden up our list and
Mm-hmm.
try to target that ICP. And
Okay.
so we don't have a specific list, but we do try to bring in as many as much engagement as we can. And
Okay.
then all that flows through our our CRM and all of that, so then the seller can see what is the engagement from their specific list of accounts, and then they can reach out once one account
Okay.
is engaging.
Okay. So broadly, what's your account selection strategy? Like, how did you end up selecting this 300 accounts, or like whatever,
Yep.
right? So how do you go
Yeah.
about,
So
and how do you also maintain the list, right? So when do you
mhm.
promote, or when do you
Yeah.
add, remove from an account list? What's the strategy there?
Yeah. Yeah, so that list is, like I said, based on industry. So we picked one industry specifically. We're now starting to look into a second industry, but it's one vertical. We
Mm-hmm.
looked at all of our North America team. So we have a lot of different regions within North America from a sales perspective. So we looked at that team and we essentially selected all of the accounts that were within that industry. And so that was around that number. So then with that list, we're doing the one to few targeting.
Okay. So the 300 is something that, like, just it came to 300, or is like you had some kind of
Yeah,
a number in mind and then you work backwards and then
right.
try applying filters, right? So in a way that you bring it down to
Yeah,
that
so right.
range.
I don't think there's a magic number. I think
Mm.
you definitely need a critical mass because you don't want to be, so low that you don't see any engagement. You definitely want, a number of accounts that you can at least get some engagement, because you have to be realistic. Some accounts are just never going to buy from you, right? So
That's right.
you definitely need a critical mass. I don't know what the magic number is. Our list kind of came up to that number. I would say you definitely want to be high for one to few. You definitely want to be higher than 200 or so, and lower than 500. I would say. If
Mm-hmm.
you get into the high hundreds or even thousands, then you're doing one too many. Then that's not one too few.
Mm.
And again, like try to bucket them into either industries or a similar challenge they have. Something that they all have similar, so that you
Mm.
can hone into that, because otherwise you're just doing demand generation, right? If you're just going after everyone without really having something that they have in common.
Right. And what's the strategy about refilling or taking accounts out of your one to many list?
Yeah, so one too many, they come off if the seller engages. So if the seller starts to engage and they become opportunities and things like that, then they come off. And depending on the account, we can then help the seller with more of a one-to-one, or
Okay.
more specific support there.
Right.
Or once they become customer, then they become they go into more of the customer marketing type of programs that we have.
Okay.
But otherwise, we try to not remove them in the one to few program. If it's one
Mm-hmm.
to one and they don't engage at all after 2 or 3 months, then yes, we definitely start to look at it and say, hey, this doesn't make sense. There's no engagement. Why are we continuing with this?
Right.
But I do think that you need to give it at least a couple of months, because they won't engage on the first week. But in
Right.
one to few, I don't think there's any harm in having the account included, even if they're not
True.
engaging. Just
Right.
continue to obviously don't be spammy, like email and things like that. That's a little bit more
Sure.
delicate, but with digital strategies, with content, with inviting them to webinars or events, I don't think there's any harm in doing that if
Mm-hmm.
they are a part of your ICP.
Okay. So the one to few list is a derivative of one to many, right? It has been derived
Right,
from your one to many list, right?
right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And would a one to many also have a named account, let's say a preferred account or anything like that, or you would have it in your one to few?
No, there could be named accounts that are in the one to many.
One to
It's
many
just
thing.
it
Okay.
depends. So right now, one to few is very industry specific. If you're in a different
Right.
industry, but you could still be a named account. You would still be in the one to many.
Okay. Yeah. So let's say if there is an inbound that is not part of your industry focused industry,
Mhm.
how would you engage with them? So do you have another bucket or something like that? So where anything that is not this industry specific, so you put them into
Yeah.
have some specific campaign. Is that
Yeah.
the approach? Yeah.
Yeah, so that would just go through our regular, inbound process. It goes to a BDR. The BDR qualifies it. If they are, they would usually be in our ICP. They then connect with the sales team, and it gets passed over to sales, and we continue the conversation there.
Right. uh, how do you sort of drive this sales marketing alignment, right? So I think that's one of the critical
Yeah.
areas, right? So you talked about how you have weekly cadences and things like that. So
Mhm.
outside of that, are there any specific set of activities that you guys do which basically helps in this close
Yeah.
coordinated effort?
Yeah, so I'm always very clear with our sales team from the beginning on what we expect from them, right? This is not a marketing thing, it is a go to market thing. We have to do this together. And it's not
Mm,
just marketing doing the homework, sales has to do their homework too. And so just make sure you have those expectations from the get go, and especially at the leadership level, not just
yeah.
with the seller themselves, but their manager and their manager, to make sure that they are going to do their part. Not that they wouldn't, but they have a ton of accounts. So if they're not, if this is not one of their priorities, then let's look
Mm,
for another account.
right.
So I'm very clear from the very beginning on what is expected from them. And then
Mm,
yes, we have the weekly sync. We all get together. Everybody brings their piece. So the BDR will share, any advancement or any prospecting activity or anything that they have found. The seller will bring, more research or more engagement that they found, and the marketer is constantly tracking, the engagement on our digital assets, our website, our webinars, anything else, and bringing that to the table. So between the three of them, they get together and can continue that account plan. But yeah, I think the alignment with sales, it has to be, you have to be aligned on expectations, and you have to be aligned on metrics and how you're going to measure this, because it's not the same as measuring a demand generation program. You can't be tracking leads and MQLs. You're going to have to see the account engagement. And really what I try to do is compare that to non ABM accounts, instead of
mm,
comparing leads and things like that. So really trying to drive that. And I think sales really understands it very quickly, because like I said, they've been doing ABM forever. So
right.
whenever they hear you talking about, hey, what we're trying to do is drive engagement, drive meetings, drive conversations, that really makes the alignment easier than if you go in saying we're going to bring leads and MQLs, because that doesn't really fit into their strategy, right?
Makes
Sorry if
sense.
you can hear the heat here. It just turned on.
That's fine. That's fine. I think it's okay. um, So, like we initially spoke, right? So, there are a lot of companies, even startups, right? Smaller startups, they wanted to do ABM, right? Maybe they
Mhm.
don't have enough budgets, they don't have resources sometimes, right? But
Yeah.
is there a way such organizations can actually get into the ABM approach, right? And if so,
Yeah.
what are the some basic sort of hygiene that they need to have before even they start thinking about executing ABM programs?
Yeah. So I do think you need some basic technology to run it. Not that you need to buy, the flashy big vendors, but you definitely need a good CRM, and a way for you to connect with sales in terms of the accounts that you're looking at. If you're trying to, you could go off with like a spreadsheet, but it just becomes very messy very quickly. So I would at least try to have a CRM in place, and a marketing automation platform, or some way to track engagement on the marketing side.
Hmm.
So those two things at least.
Hmm.
But yeah, but other than that, I don't think you need very sophisticated tools. It's really more about setting the strategy and setting the building blocks that you need to really start to scale, right? So as long as you can see account engagement, and then you can track your leads to your account with the contacts, all of that, messiness in Salesforce. As long as you can do that, I think you can go ahead and start.
Sure. Let's say they don't have a lot of advertising budget, right? And you said
Hmm.
maybe emailing may not be the very
Yeah.
first thing that they should try attempt. And then let's say they don't have this budget, right? So in that case, like how should they approach?
Yeah. So I think an easier way might be to start like a webinar type of series, or
Hmm.
a digital event of some sort. You don't need a lot of advertising budget for that. It's all internal. Find good speakers. If you can bring some of your customers, or even folks from the accounts you're trying to target, bring them on. Have them have a good session with you. Ask them questions, cover a topic, and then that could be sort of like in a cadence. You either do it weekly or monthly, or bi-weekly, whatever the cadence is, but really inviting everyone else on your list to those sessions. That is an
Hmm.
easy way to start to get engagement there and start to get your point of view across,
Hmm.
rather than just trying to do a ton of advertising.
Sure. Okay. So that makes sense. Uh, and what type of companies should actually like think about ABM, right? So there are some, it could be like revenue based checklists that they can apply and then say, okay, if my ACV is so much, right? But other than that, in
Yeah.
your experience, right? So
Yeah.
how should company decide whether or not to take this ABM based marketing approach or a GTM approach?
Yeah, I think it makes sense when your sale is not transactional. If you're selling a product that folks can just come to your website and buy it on the website on the spot, that might not be ABM is not as valuable there, because you could do more generic demand generation. So if you don't have a transactional sale, and you need a long sales cycle with a relationship sale with the sales team and all of that, that is one of the pieces that I always make sure you have for to start an ABM.
Right.
And then also the buying committee you're going after. So again, if you're only going after one persona and you can transact with one person at the account, ABM doesn't really make sense, because with ABM you're trying to go after a big account and a big, a larger number of people. So it makes more sense when you're actually selling to a buying committee, right? You have 5, 6, 7 folks always involved in a transaction. That's when ABM makes a lot of sense. A lot of
Okay.
people say, number of employees at the account, or the account has to be this big, or I don't think it matters how big the account is. I think it
Mm.
matters if the buying committee is, large enough that it warrants an ABM strategy.
And presumably some sort of a team in place, either in-house or an outsourced kind of an agency where they could help in producing content and all of that, isn't it? So that's also a consideration that they should have.
Yeah, that's true. You definitely, you're going to need some sort of content creation and content generation. So if you don't have that in house, definitely make sure you have that. You have an agency or someone, a third party, that can help you with that before you even launch into ABM.
Hmm.
But again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. With the content that you already have, you could just transform that a little bit for to fit into the accounts that you're trying to go after. So
Sure.
that I don't think that should be a limitation.
Right. Because the reason for these questions, I think there are companies, I think just in the last couple of days, right, I've had conversations with some prospects of ours, right, so where they don't even have the product out yet, but they are thinking
Hmm.
about a marketing process, or more
Hmm.
specifically they wanted to do ABM, right? For, and they're building the team, I
Yeah,
don't think they have a lot of content and things like that, right? So for
right.
those kind of companies, are they too early in your opinion?
I think so. I think you need more of a demand generation strategy before you can launch into ABM, because you need the building blocks of, who's our ideal customer, who is, where is our audience, where do they hang out, what events do they attend, all of those pieces. You need to know that before you can launch into ABM, in my opinion. And so having at least that piece, if you're just starting out, I would focus more on a demand generation, one to many type of program, where you are creating the content that is learning about the content that resonates, creating that type of content, and trying to distill where am I having more success. And then that's where you start to go a little bit finer into one to few, one to one. But
Sure.
just starting out of the gates with an ABM strategy right away, I mean, maybe if you're in a market where it's a super finite market and you only have 10 accounts that you can go after, then yes, maybe it is a
Makes sense.
ABM right out of the gates. But
Right.
otherwise, I would try to put together more of a demand generation strategy first, and once that is working, then you can start to refine that to ABM.
Right. And on the flip side, so those companies which are primarily, let's say, inbound, right, and then they have some kind of a motion
Mm-hmm.
in place, and if they are thinking about introducing ABM, maybe trying to wanting to go to high value accounts or
Mm-hmm.
expansions and things like that, right? How do you think they should approach integrating ABM into their existing marketing processes?
Yeah, so I always say demand generation and ABM go hand in hand. So I really recommend having separate teams, or at least people focusing on each one separately, because otherwise it's very easy to be too busy with demand generation to then pay attention to ABM. So I try
Right.
to split it up. We have our ABM. We don't have an ABM team, but most of our ABM sits with our field marketing team, because they are aligned with sales. They're talking to sales all the time. They have a
Mm.
territory that they cover. It's just they have the basics of ABM, and then on top of that, they just add the content and the targeting a little bit. But I would say, separate the teams, or have at least, that focus, because otherwise it's tough to try to get, someone who's been doing demand generation to suddenly be your ABM expert, right? But they go hand in hand. So like everything you're doing on the demand generation side of the house should be applied to your ABM. It's just, making sure that you pick the strategies, the tactics, and the content that applies to the accounts you're going after, and not trying to just, boil the ocean with everything.
That makes sense. So we touched upon the ABM technologies a little bit. Don't worry.
Mhm.
I hope, assume she's your friend or whoever, right? But
Yeah, yeah, it's in the office. Yeah.
yeah, it's fine. So yeah, I just trying to understand the impact of ABM technologies, right,
Mhm.
on your overall ABM program, right? ABM platforms. Like, what role
Mhm.
has it played positively or negatively, right? Uh, right. Do
Yeah.
you have any views on that?
Yeah, so I haven't found one ABM platform that does everything that I would like it to do.
Right.
So I think an ABM program is always going to be a mix of different technologies, and you're going to need, a couple of different things.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that you need some tool or some way to really understand account engagement at an account level. It's very hard to see that engagement from a CRM only. So
Right.
some sort of tool that can show you, hey, this account, these are all the touch points we've done, this is their journey, right, this is how they're engaging. That to me is super valuable, and it's very helpful for us to then go to the seller and say, hey, look at this journey, this is what we've done, this is how it's playing out, and now let's continue this account plan.
Mm-hmm.
So at least that. We also use intent data, but honestly, it's another data point for us. It's not
Right.
a
The only
strategy
data
of its
point. Yeah.
own.
Mm.
Right. So it's a data point. It's good to know. We do track, competitive keywords and things like that. And so we can see, oh, if an account is interested in a competitor, we then know, what type of product they might be looking at, or what
Right.
strategy we could go with. But again, it's just another data point. You could do it without intent data. It's not essential to ABM, in my opinion.
Mm.
And then at some point, you definitely need some way to target those accounts digitally. So either with customized landing pages, with customized ads, all of that technology. You don't need it right off the bat, but I do think that as you grow the ABM play, you will definitely start to look into those vendors too.
Mm. So what would be, so you've been doing ABM for the last, what, 8 years now. So what would be an
Mhm.
ideal ABM platform, right, where you have everything at one place? What are the different components that you essentially need, but it's not available, and hence you keep looking for other tools, or
Yeah.
try to like integrate to other platforms or
Yeah.
whatever?
Yeah, so definitely something that can integrate with our CRM, so that the sellers don't have to go to yet another platform, and they can see everything from we're on Salesforce, so everything from Salesforce, but whatever CRM you're using.
Hmm.
And again, a platform where you can see the entire customer journey, the account journey in one place. So see all of the different demand generation bits and pieces that you've put into that account, right? So
Sure.
are they engaging with our customized ads and landing pages? But then going beyond that, from the demand generation side, are they coming to an event? Are they coming to a webinar? Are they doing any of the other things? And really be able to see all of that in one place. I haven't really found that yet. So if you find it, let me know.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was wondering about budgets, right, for ABM
Mhm,
programs, right? So, what is the framework or a methodology somebody should adopt, right, to seek budgets, right? Especially when you have something in work, maybe some
mhm,
kind of a demand gen program already, but you wanted to
mhm.
kickstart with an ABM program, right? So, how do you approach
Yeah.
the budget requirements for an ABM program?
Yeah, so again, it depends on, are you looking to buy tech or not? The technology is expensive, so you need to keep that in mind. But other if you put the tools aside and just thinking about, the programs that you want to run, I would try to not spend too much money right off the gates. Like I said, if you're doing an event, for example, from your demand generation side of the house, then try to use that event to target your accounts, right? Have one of your target accounts come and speak at the event, or have a dinner the day before the event, and you can get 4 or 5 folks from your target accounts, more on an ABM side of the house, right? Or things like that. Like, I wouldn't try to just say, hey, here's a bunch of money that I need to spend on this thing specifically. With the things that you're already doing, start to pick from that and start to build your ABM program based on that.
Hmm.
Because like we all know, it's hard to get budget for anything, and getting
Sure.
budget for something that you haven't proved yet is just a very difficult conversation to have. So I would rather grab from things we're already doing, but do it on a more customized and ABM type of way. And then once
Hmm.
you have a couple of accounts engaging, or a couple of wins, a couple of things that you can then go and say, hey, we generated these meetings from this, or we generated these conversations, can we now get a little bit more budget to do more specific things for that?
Right. In the latter scenarios, right, where you proved some through pilot
Hmm.
or other ways,
Hmm.
right? So would
Yeah.
the budgets be coming, let's say, more specifically for your one to few kind of an ABM approaches, right? So would it be at a,
Hmm.
let's say, at an account level, or would you
Hmm.
just roll up to maybe a list level? How do you approach again the
Yeah,
budget requirements?
we would do it at a list level, so not by account, because then you're running to the risk that if an account doesn't engage, then that budget seems to be lost. So I would try to do it at as a bucket, right? Like, we have this bucket of accounts. We want this much budget to engage, and you have to play out the entire scenario. You have to say, this is gonna be the conversion rate. We're gonna produce these many meetings. From these meetings, we're gonna produce this much pipeline.
Right.
And then obviously that has to compare to your demand generation or other programs that you're running, because if that is not as good, then who's going to give you the budget, right?
Right. Right.
So you need that strategic thinking of, like, the numbers are going to be lower, because we all know I'm not bringing in leads, I'm not bringing MQLs, but I am
Right.
bringing good conversations, and these are the accounts that we definitely want this year. So it's more of a strategic conversation rather than just plain numbers, and this dollar in budget is going to bring this many leads.
Sure. Uh, Related to that, right? So one of the challenges that we keep hearing from the early implementers of ABM is, right, from the marketing side of things, right? So how do I go and then convey to my exec team, right, that I've actually
Hmm.
played a part in building this pipeline, right? So I had
Hmm.
played my part to do this, to, let's say, create opportunities, influence opportunities, right? So
Hmm.
how do you go and then, like, just position the marketing team's
Yeah.
involvement in an overall pipeline generation effort?
Yeah, I think the best way to do that is look at your conversion rates, because again, you're not going to be able to compare leads to leads and MQLs to
That's
MQLs.
right.
So I would look at conversion rates and say we set out with say 300 accounts, and we actually converted 20%, or I'm just making these numbers up, but 20% to meetings, and then
Mhm.
this much into opportunities. Versus if you look at your demand generation programs, or whatever you have going on already, the conversion
Mhm.
rates are probably going to be lower, just because you're more, you're wider, you're not as customized, you are not as targeted. So comparing the conversion rates like that and saying we still need the demand generation piece, obviously, because we have, the program already producing, and that is sort of like, continuous pipeline coming in. But if we do this type of program where it's more customized, then the conversion rates are higher. And comparing ABM to non-ABM accounts, you start to see that conversion rate, be much higher and much better.
Sure. Again, based on your experience, right? So, how long does it take for ABM programs to stabilize, mature, and it starts like being itself and start producing results?
Yeah, it's a long-term program for sure, and that is one of the challenges we've seen with, especially with sales teams that are, very impatient and they want results tomorrow.
That's
And
right.
sometimes, they themselves, like, they change accounts quarter over quarter and things like
Hmm.
that, and that just doesn't work. You can't expect results in a quarter even. So again, going back to setting up the expectations of, hey guys, this is not going to work in quarter. This is, almost like a year long program. It's very
Hmm.
hard to sell a year long program, at least in my
Exactly.
experience. So you have to break it out into chunks, and you have to say,
Hmm.
okay, this quarter, this is what we're going to do, right? And next quarter, this is what we'll do. So, for example, the way we structured this year was, in the first quarter, we are going to do the one to few, and we're going to go after, these 30, 40 accounts. And then within that quarter, we're going to track engagement. And then the second quarter, we'll take, the top 10, 12 accounts that have engaged in the first quarter. And in the second quarter, we're then doing one-to-one for those, or, a more specific approach to those. So really, in that sense, and then just being, you have to be fast and reactive. If there's an account that is completely cold, they're not responding to anything, they're not doing anything, then you have to be willing to say, look, it's not working, let's swap it out. Because there's no point in carrying an account for like 9 or 10 months and then get to a year
Right.
and say, well, we didn't do anything with this account, right? So
Right.
you have to be patient on one side, but also fast to react. If things are not working, just pivot and do something else, because
Hmm.
at the end of the year, you are going to have to show results.
Right. Okay. I had a question around your favorite ABM campaign. Is there a disastrous ABM campaign where you're not able to engage, right? So you set this like goal for a
Yeah.
quarter, right? So where nothing moved,
Mhm.
right? And then how exactly did you recover, and then how did you keep going? So are there any instances like that?
Yeah, so I would definitely say, so I wouldn't say it's a bad campaign if you don't generate meetings or, pipeline, as long as you learn
Hmm.
something, right? Like,
Right.
I didn't, this is the famous Edison quote, right? Like, I didn't fail 1,000 times, I just found 1,000 ways that don't work.
Right.
So that's really what you have to
Does that sell
convey.
to your sales teams or the exec team?
Right. It's a very, very different message if you go to a QBR and say, oh, we didn't get anything out of this ABM. Or
Right.
if you go and say, look, we didn't get meetings, but we saw this content resonates. This event was good because of blah, or like we had a good conversation with this account. And, you start to bring in those bits, even if
Hmm.
you actually didn't really generate, pipeline or revenue, right? So you
Right.
definitely have to show what you have learned and how you're going to apply it going forward.
Hmm.
But again, be able to pivot quickly. Don't get stuck. Sometimes marketers, we get stuck into like, no, we're doing it and we're going to keep doing it and we just want to do it more, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
If it's
Hmm.
not working, it's not working. Just, recover from it, learn from it, and just move on, because there's no point in continuing doing something that doesn't work.
That makes sense. Uh, Final couple of questions, right? So
Yeah.
again, based on your experience, there are different parts in an ABM or a successful ABM program, right? So things like the alignment that we talked about, things like account selection, right? So the orchestration that goes in terms of like how do you
Yes.
structure your different campaigns, personalization of all these things, right? So what do you think is the single most factor that affects, right, whether your program is going to be successful
Yep.
or not?
Definitely the number one thing for me is account selection. If you
Hmm.
pick the wrong accounts, you're never going to get anywhere. It is the, where everything originates, and you have to be very confident on the accounts you're selecting. It is, to me, it's a joint effort. It has to come from sales and marketing. So a lot of people just go to sales and say, hey, give me your, top 10 accounts and I'll run with that. That's not
Right.
really how it should be, in my opinion. That's why I like the approach of, hey, we'll pick the 300, and then from there let's start to see who is engaging and who, where we can hone in, other than try
Hmm.
to go and knock on cold doors, because that might never work. So definitely the account selection. Make sure you know your ICP very well. Make sure you pick accounts where you have been successful, or similar accounts to what you've been successful in the past. I wouldn't
Right.
launch into a brand new industry with brand new personas with an ABM approach. Like you don't even
Mm.
know where to go, right? So
Right.
make sure you know what type of account you want to target, what type of persona, what is the content that resonates, where do they hang out, what are the activities that they engage with, before
Right.
you just launch blindly.
Perfect. Hey, thank you so much. I think it has been like a very insightful discussion. Like I've learned a lot of things, and I'm sure our audience too will resonate with what the experience that you've had, right? So, any parting thoughts, right? So, how can people reach out to you, right? I know that you're very active on LinkedIn. That's where we got connected.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, Cristina Daroca. You can find me and send me a connection request. I'm happy to always connect with marketers that are on the same boat. And yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Christina, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, same here. Thank you.